And here we are in Ways and Means. Good afternoon. It's Wednesday, March 11th, 1:15 p.m. We have all committee members here and accounted for. We are picking up H775. We did a walkthrough on this last week and heard from a few folks and had a few witnesses that we were not able to get to. And then we have an amendment from Cam that we're going to fit in later in testimony when we get him from House Judiciary. So if we could start with you, Samantha. Thank you.
Hi. For the record, I'm Samantha Sheehan, the Municipal Policy and Advocacy Specialist for the Vermont League of Cities and Towns. And we are pleased to support H775. Oh, what happened? And specifically, I would like to talk to you about the special assessment revenue bond.
That's what we wanted to talk to you about.
So I'm gonna start by talking about special assessment districts, which are.
That would be so appreciated.
I'm also gonna spit my gum out because I feel impolite. So special assessment districts are an existing authority of all municipalities if they choose to use them. One existing special assessment district in Vermont you've definitely been to before. We're in it right now, the Montpelier Downtown Investment District. So that's a good example of how a municipality can use this tool. So a special assessment district functions to allow the municipal corporation to assess fees to a portion of the community in order to provide enhanced public service. And those public services could be like sewer. So there might be parts of a town that receive sewer and parts that do not, and they may facilitate assessing those fees through an assessment district. Or it could be services like trash removal, enhanced snow removal, it could be economic development programming. There's a wide variety. The law does not prescribe what those would be. And this is a Title 24 authority. It's universal. You don't need a charter. You don't need a certain form of local government. It's just something that exists. They have to be created, however, by a townwide vote. So that would typically be done at town meeting day at the annual meeting of the town, but it could be done by a special meeting or by Australian ballot. And as long as a simple majority of the voters approve with the creation of the district, or every single parcel owner that would be assessed agrees in writing. Those are the two ways you can create an assessment district. And you can include or exclude certain property classes. So for Montpelier, it's a good example. When this was first created, I think around 2014, they only assessed fees against commercial properties in the improvement district. I think a year or maybe 2 years ago, they also added a fee structure for residential properties. In both cases in Montpelier, it's a fee assessed by square footage. That's a really common structure, but the way the fees are assessed follow the normal ways municipalities can assess fees. So it can be done through a vote at the town meeting as part of the budget setting process as a ballot question. It can be done by an action of the legislative body. And often it's done through ordinance. The reason to do that is you can set a fee schedule in ordinance so the fee payers know every year the fee will increase by 3% or whatever. And the town doesn't have to reopen the question or reopen the ordinance on an annual basis in order to adjust the fees. So that's how special assessment districts work now. And they can be hard to pass because they require a vote of the whole municipality, a majority of the whole municipality, in order to assess first a unique fee on some residents, but not all, and to provide a service to some residents, but not all. So we do sometimes see these assessment district votes fail, depending on the sort of intent and purpose of them. So what H775 does is take two existing municipal authorities. One is revenue bonds, the other is special assessment districts, and it creates a new municipal finance authority, which is special assessment district revenue bonds. So what is changing there is that it would allow the municipality to use just the revenue it earns from the district that's already been created to bond and to service the debt of the bond without having to put up the whole full faith and credit of all the general fund of the whole municipality, which could result in an increase in municipal property tax rates down the line. Whereas if it's just backed by the special assessment district, the thing that could increase over time is the fees paid by those district fee payers. And then here's some resources in the PDF version. You can look through those. I included the organizing article for the Montpelier one if you wanted to kind of see what that looks like when the question goes to voters.
Can I ask you a question? So in all your scenarios, both under sort of what's happening now and what's changing, it's all infrastructure type things. I feel fairly sure that mine goes to pay for like our downtown business organization.
Yeah, that's a common, yeah, so
I just want to make sure I wasn't like totally mixed up in those two scenarios.
yeah, that's true. So it can be used for infrastructure investment, but they are commonly used, especially for in the downtown districts, for other types of services like economic development, street activation, things like festivals and farmers markets. In Burlington, I worked in Burlington City Hall for 3 years, and I can tell you it was definitely the first place that was shoveled and sanded, because there is a separate snow removal and street maintenance crew that works in the Church Street Marketplace. And so they have like an enhanced level of street maintenance services that are provided and are paid for by those special assessment fees. But it also pays for things like extra street lights and repairs to the brick marketplace and hard infrastructure as well. But it can be used for either. So in the sort of vision of H775, and so you may be thinking, great, what does this have to do with housing, or why is this a sort of pro-housing measure for municipalities to use? And the special assessment bond, it would be possible, but very unlikely, and Michael can talk to this in probably a more specific way, that the special assessment bond, revenue bond, would be used as sort of a singular investment. Like most types of public infrastructure investments that municipalities must make to enable more housing are going to be quite expensive and maybe not appropriate to socialize against a group of property owners as small as would be in an assessment district. But what those revenues could do is leverage additional money to be drawn down. So the assessment fee, so say each parcel owner is paying $1,000 a year, right? In assessment fees, that revenue can be brought to the bond, which captures a larger upfront investment. That bond could be used for grant match. It could be used in combination with SRF. It could be used in combination with other federal investment schemes for different types of infrastructure endeavors or housing projects. And so that's likely how this would be deployed. It would not be to use special assessment fees to bring in 20 million for a wastewater plant. It would be to bring in the necessary grant match to complete the funding stack for the wastewater plant. Yeah. So, I think this is maybe not the intent of the committee that brought this forward, but we definitely see like an immediate application for certain types of compliance projects. Notably, the 3-acre rule is something that municipalities have really struggled to support private homeowners in complying with. And this opens up, I think, an important opportunity for communities like Milton, Richmond, Morrisville, where you have a group of neighbors facing a significant cost to compliance to state regulation, and the municipality could help facilitate them through that with the new revenue bond authority without burdening the rest of the town. So that's all I had about that. And Representative Kimball had also asked me, to be prepared to
Before
answer.
you move to the next thing, so.
Yeah.
Could you explain the 3-acre rule for me?
The 3-acre rule is a stormwater regulation that was adopted several years ago by the state of Vermont. It applies to already developed lands. In some cases, these include homes. And it basically says if you have more acres of impervious surface, you must comply. Yeah. And so there are some situations where you have neighborhoods where some or all or just a few of the houses in the neighborhood are subject to the regulation, but it's not the whole town or the whole neighborhood. And so there are few to no options to pay for that together.
Representative Maslin.
Yeah, thank you. The proposal you're outlining, what as I see it, expanded potential source for paying off the bond and therefore it might be able to pay the bond off more rapidly, yes,
Possibly, yeah.
which would be beneficial all in all for
Mhm.
education fund, stuff like that.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Yeah. And this is not not a tax. So it's, yeah, no diversion of regular revenue sources available to
Right.
either the municipality or the state. Yeah.
What was the other thing you were gonna speak to?
Small town minimums for grand list maintenance.
Oh, whoa, really shifting gears for a moment. Okay, cool, let's do it.
Okay. So
Just to make sure, I imagine everyone's tracking, maybe people at home aren't tracking. I'll just say, this is totally about a different bill that we needed to hear from you all on. So this is about a regional assessment district.
yeah, and thank you for letting me slip in a 2-in-1 during crossover week.
Thank you for offering.
So, last we spoke about the regional assessment district bill before crossover. I had testified in favor of creating a small town minimum payment of something in the range of 7,500 to 10,000 for the annual grand list maintenance. So this is for the regular daily, weekly work of listers and boards of listers that happens outside of mass reappraisal or through the future regional assessment process. And I think what's in the newest draft of the bill is $8.50 per parcel without the equalization payment, which is currently $1 per parcel. And what we know is every town manages and pays for this in a different way. And so there's no like one rule of what is the annual expense per parcel or per town. But we do have from VLCT's annual salary and benefit surveys some information about the average cost of listers and assessors. And VALA had provided us an estimate of the amount of time or hours per week would be necessary for small town grand lists. And what they said basically is there's like a 4-hour per week practical minimum. So if you have a grand list that's 200 to 1,000 parcels, that's about 4 hours per week year round in order to maintain the grand lists effectively, whether you have a elected lister or an appointed assessor that's contracted. And then looking at sort of average costs for the CAMA, for the computers, for tax mapping services, et cetera. We would put that at a range of 4,000 to 8,000 for the kind of fixed non-personnel costs. And then actually while I was waiting to testify just before the break, I was sitting in my home office with my Hancock annual town report for town meeting day. And we are actually about to go into reappraisal this August. townwide reappraisal this August for the first time since 2008. And we are a super small town. We have 220 spans and 147 residential units of housing on our grand list. So I thought this might be kind of a fun example. So you can see how this plays out in real life. So
I just
Hancock,
wanna,
yeah.
and I think this is a really helpful exercise. I just wanna name that the 850 and the minimum we were talking about was actually just for grand list maintenance.
Yes.
Not to save up for the reappraisal.
Right.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
And obviously reappraisal is more expensive if grand list maintenance doesn't happen.
exactly. And so in Hancock, we have not paid for a reappraisal since 2008. So all the annual payments have gone into the reappraisal fund, which as of the end of the last fiscal year was $33,000. So you can see that it takes quite a long time to sort of raise up that money. So in Hancock, we have an appointed assessor. And I looked back at several years of costs, and that ranged like basically $5,000 to $8,000 is what the town paid annually for annual grand list maintenance from a professional assessor, again, for 220 spans. I think Hancock's the 11th smallest town. So it was like kind of encroaching on 8,000 for this fiscal year. And then we went out to bid and we expect this, and I asked at town meeting and the select board confirmed that the contract we got for the new reappraisal is with our current contracted assessor, and it will be less than the 33,000 in the reserve fund.
So your annual cost, $57,000 to $8,000, does that include the CAMA software?
So we don't,
Well,
we,
because the assessor got
yeah.
contracted out, so they have their own software.
yeah, so we pay for a software, we do pay for tax mapping and then a sort of bulk payment, I don't know, an all-inclusive payment to the assessor. So we pay for tax mapping and the assessor cost, and the range is 5,000 to 8,000 per year. Yeah. And then again, you know, if we had 400, 800, you could reasonably double that. So it would be more in the 10 to 16,000 range. But then Vala says that then there's sort of a leveling off when you get above 1,000 parcels in the hours per. Yeah.
Just last time.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Do
you
you
so
have
much.
any questions about the first half? Okay, second half, great, thank you.
Oh, wait, sorry. Can I say one more thing? Yeah, sure. I actually went to Vala's meeting today and discussed lots of things, but they pointed out. So on my slide that I just had up, it showed that the annual interest the annual interest that Hancock earns on the grand list reserve fund, reappraisal reserve fund is about $400 to $500. So the state makes the per parcel payment, it goes into the reserve fund, it earns interest in the bank account. And that's that's more, we're currently earning more annually in interest than we're getting in the equalization payments by 2. So Vala has pointed out that under the proposed reappraisal reimbursement, that would happen after the contract is signed and PVR has your scheduled reappraisal under the 6-year timeline. So without having annual payments, towns are basically losing that annual interest that they're currently accruing in between mass reappraisals. So just
They
wanted
might
to point that out.
accruing to some degree because master appraisals aren't happening as often as. So even if they keep the money and we go to every 6 year, probably they'll have less interest.
Correct.
Okay, great, thank you.
Some towns might not be banking it totally separately.
Many are not.
Many are not. Yeah, well, and because many are paying. It's a regular expense of the general fund, which is why they don't do that. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay, we're gonna put our heads back into, what's the number of the bill? 775. And Michael, do you want to join us? Okay, thank you. Okay, whatever works for you.
Michael Gahn, Executive Director of the Vermont Bond Bank. Nice to see everyone in person, double header today, so I thought I'd show up in person.
Thank you for that. Nice to see you.
Yeah. Would you like me to just give perspective on this?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I thought it might be worthwhile to start at the beginning of how we even, I think we're responsible for a lot of this bill and where it really came from. And if you remember, back in time when we had more money than we knew what to do with just a few years ago and had some really great ambitions, specifically with like village wastewater systems. We watched that firsthand as the fiscal or the financial administrator of the SRF fund, and those loans are in our name. And we, watched several of those, despite large amounts of subsidy, not be able to move forward because the local community couldn't leverage that. That's the small amount of capital that needed to be sponsored by the municipality. And so it became clear to us that the nature of, and in those instances, a lot of the purpose was to support housing and some density, and the townwide vote in some instances, not all, became sort of like a backdoor form of not in my backyard. And so could we look at, take a national perspective and think about other municipal finance tools that are out there and very commonly used that could be applied to this Vermont situation? So that was really the genesis of this idea a while ago. And we sort of had it in the back of our heads. And then as we did a lot of work on, the state has done a lot of work over housing the past couple of years, became, I think, to me, pressing to provide another tool in the toolbox that won't necessarily be the end all be all, but will be very helpful. So there are 39 states, and this is the one pager that I sent. It just shows basically special assessment revenue bonds or tax allocation bonds, which are very similar nationally, public deals. 39 states have issued those over the last 5 years, including peer communities like New Hampshire, West Virginia, other small states as well. And so it's a very, very common tool. The idea is that those that are going to benefit from the infrastructure should be those that are on the hook to pay for the debt that is taken out for that infrastructure. And so the way in which we see this occurring, you'll see what we don't want as a steward of local debt in the state is we don't want a bunch of junk bonds floating around the state and sort of speculative banking on land secured finance. So you see some guardrails that we requested be added, where it can be the bond bank, it can be you have to have what is one notch above the lowest investment grade rating, or you have to have obviously we don't want to exclude the local banking community and credit union community. So, or you have to have a commitment from them, knowing that they're regulated entities and it has some underwriting standards. So there's some guardrails when and how the debt can be issued. We hope that a lot of it would come through the bond bank. The housing revolving loan fund that we have after last session is a place that we would intend to host some of this debt if this is successful in going forward. And it can be used for all sorts of purposes under the special assessment language, but we do see it having a really clear nexus to housing development. So that is where we came from this and why we think it's important. So we want to have this tool, put some guardrails around it so it doesn't get abused, and be good stewards.
And the guardrails that are in the bill work for you.
Yes.
Anyone have any questions?
Just the borrower is the municipality.
That's right. As a special lien, there's some states in which a special district is used. We don't want to create more entities, more units of government in the state. A fire district effectively operates very similarly to this, but we need less units of government, not more. So that's why we want it to be a special lien within the host municipality.
And if for some reason the members of the special assessment district don't pay, is it an obligation of the municipality?
No. yeah, your only recourse would be to the special assessments.
It's a collection process like any loan obligation. It's not secured by the real estate.
It's a uniform tax bill, so it's on the same, non-payment would be subject to the same abilities of the municipality to have tax lien sales and that kind of thing. So that's very helpful, as opposed to, say, a mortgage, which is like a real estate mortgage. It's second in priority to your tax payment, so it's above that. But it's not, there's no obligation of the municipality other than that, other than those revenues for repayment. But you still have the ability to go back and get your tax money, that's due. And so that's why it's such an effective tool. Well, it's like, especially it's under statute, user fees and water systems effectively are like taxes in terms of the powers the municipality has to collect them. So, what is a tax,
Thank you so much, Mike.
Great.
Appreciate
Thank you.
it. We are now going to move to Cam with the amendments. John, I'm not quite sure why you're here, but I'm glad to see you. Okay, cool. And then we'll hear from the treasurer's office after that. Let me know if you want to participate. Okay.
Afternoon. For the record, Aaron Wood, Office of Legislative Counsel. I'm going to walk through a proposed amendment to 775.
I'm not saying.
Sure, as Cam is presenting a couple of different things. One is after looking at the bill and the concern that we had about the interest being reallocated from the local investment advisory committee, the payments on those loans that were made in there that currently go into the general fund, that would be foregone revenue to the general fund. And then, so that was a concern that we had. So this amendment will actually take that out. And also the creation of a special fund, that is often objected to as creating a yet another special fund. So that is not in this as well. So the amendment takes that out. At the same time, the vice chair of House General had some wording regarding the municipal plan for housing and some changes to that section of this particular bill that they would like to see us make after further testimony and input. So that's really the changes we're looking at.
So one is like a Ways and Means amendment, and the other is we're doing a favor to the other committee, so there isn't a floor amendment, just because it's a confusing time of year, and it's nice to have tidy packages.
These are dumb questions, but for the record, so we're not gonna put the money in the general fund. It'll go, and how will we keep track of it then?
So the money does go in the general fund. So the existing path for any revenues that are generated from the local are already going into the general fund.
Yeah.
And in conversations with the appropriations committee, they're trying to squeeze the lemon as hard as they can to find money to fund the other areas of government. So it doesn't preclude the appropriation of money from the general fund towards this type of project.
Misspoke in your explanation is straightforward. Thank you.
Cam.
Okay. As you can see here, we have a proposed amendment to the report of the Committee on General and Housing. There are 4 instances of amendment. The first 3, as was mentioned, are to remove in the bill where the treasurer's office would maintain interest on these loans and then put those into a specific special fund. I can pull the language back up from the bill if you would like, but I won't unless you ask me to. Just as a quick recollection from the bill, the treasurer's office has the authority currently to take 10% of the state's average cash on hand and invest those dollars. They can be invested in housing. Lately, they've been invested in housing. There is a proposal in the underlying report from the General Committee to raise that from 10% to 12.5%. To then authorize a 1% credit facility, so 1% of the state's average cash on hand, to invest in offsite or bulk purchasing of offsite constructed housing. If they utilize that 1%, it equally reduces the 12.5%. So we're not going to 13.5%, still at 12.5. All of that's remaining. There was separate language that allowed the treasurer's office to keep the interest on all of the loans from these credit facilities that they have statutory authorization to issue. They would keep all of that interest and put it into a special fund. And then that special fund could be used to, I want to make sure I get the wording right, promote the increased availability of housing, including the bulk purchasing of offsite constructed housing, could be in the form of grants, interest-free loans, and equity stakes in housing projects, et cetera. That's what the special fund was for. And so what this proposal is doing is it's just striking each of those individual instances in the sections about the interest. So the treasurer's office will no longer keep the interest. It will go to the general fund, which is where it's currently going now, as was mentioned. So that's the first, second, and third instance of amendment, removing those provisions. And then the fourth instance of amendment, as was mentioned, there is this section 7. So further down in the bill, there are changes to municipal plans, and it requires in the housing element of a municipal plan for the municipality to identify more information about whether or not the municipality can meet its regional housing targets. And the amendment here is a bit of cleanup. Didn't say cleanup, but it is in sub 1 here. Has to include an identifications, line 17, identification and analysis of existing and projected housing needs of the jurisdiction. It had originally said the projected housing needs for the population of the jurisdiction. So it's simply removing what one could argue is a bit of just, kind of unnecessary language. And then when you get to the next page, there was language in here that said the housing element of the municipal plan had to provide regulations that allow for the improvement of housing to meet those housing targets. There was some concern about, you really shouldn't be regulating within the housing element of the municipal plan, and that should be handled, through bylaws, et cetera. So that was removed. And then lastly, if the municipality, this is in the sub 2, if the municipality cannot meet its regional housing targets, the municipality has to provide to DHCD, top of page 2 here, an analysis of the constraints preventing them from meeting those targets. That all remains the same. But when you look into the sub A, and there was a previous sub B, that analysis has to include a quantification of the existing and projected housing types. And the language as it initially came out said, including location, age, condition, occupancy, et cetera. So a lot more information. And so the amendment would remove some of that burden from the municipality in the municipal plan. So they would still have to provide a quantification of the housing types. They just don't need to go to that extra step of providing, again, the location, the age, the condition, a lot more of that detail at that point. So that's the proposed amendment in the fourth instance here. And that's it.
Just want to add a couple of things. One is we had talked about the level of the 10% versus 12.5%. And I spoke with the treasurer's office about, is that too much? And they really feel comfortable by going up to the 12.5%. And then the question was, well, do you have the staff to do underwriting of loans? And again, they have conduits through whom they make loans into different entities or may contract out for someone to do underwriting. So it's not like they're staffing up an incredible amount of people to be a bank. So that made me feel more comfortable, and I think is a real prudent way to go. So the 12.5%, and what they said was the most important to them in this particular element. Just to add that little context.
The treasurer's office can
Yeah.
add to that as well. Representative Muslin?
Thank you. Charlie, I'd also represent, I'd also endorse, support the simplification of the housing language. I mean, municipalities have a lot to do. And it seems to me what, is being removed is stuff that they probably should do anyway. Thank you.
Thanks. Appreciate it. Would one of you like to? Peter. Here's yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Peter Trombley, State Treasurer's Office. Would it be most helpful for me to focus on simply answering questions the committee has, seeing as you've seen this bill before?
I guess the first question I would have is, are our amendments okay with you?
Yes.
Great.
Obviously, we prefer to plug the interest in to our existing program, but I think if we were to move the 10% to 12.5, that will create about 30 million in new lending that we can do to move housing projects forward. To date, we've helped create or save over 1,700 units of housing. We've also created over 140 permanent jobs with this program, and we've done it entirely within our existing budget. Happy to be able to do more.
Can you talk a little bit more about sort of the risk calculus that you make?
Absolutely. We look at the state's cash as really an investment portfolio. And when you're looking at an investment portfolio with high cash flow needs like the state, I think the absolute maximum we'd be comfortable putting into an illiquid asset would be 20%. If you look at a portfolio like this, 10 to 20% is typically what you see. There are a few parallels elsewhere in state governments. The Illinois Treasurer has a fund that state agencies and local governments can opt into to invest their budget and cash in between them being appropriated at funds and them needing to use it. So that's a fund that is highly liquid, funds coming in and out regularly as agencies and government bodies need them, and they only maintain about 50% liquidity. So under this bill, as you all have amended it, the state would be maintaining 85% liquidity, which we feel is very reasonable.
Anyone else have any questions? Anything else you want to tell us?
I can speak a little bit more to how we do the underwriting, if that would be helpful for members of the committee, but.
Is anyone interested in that other than Representative Kimball? He had his question answered. Yeah, okay, great. Yes, please. Thank
I'll
you.
say the Representative Kimball's explanation is quite correct. So we do all of our loans through intermediaries. The largest we've partnered with to date is BHFA, doing a lot of housing loans through them. Sometimes those partners are local banks and credit unions as well, and we like doing business with them. We underwrite the loan to that entity, and then they underwrite the loan to the developer, which, as you can imagine, is a much more complicated process. We, of course, look at the underlying financials of the projects that the investment is going to end up in, but we do rely on the underwriting capacity of the intermediary. And often it's actually the intermediary, the bank or the credit union or the HFA, that's applying to us directly and not the developer. In the few cases where we have needed to do our own underwriting that's beyond our staff's capacity, where we've needed more expertise in housing financing, we've been able to contract with an underwriter and absorb that within our existing contracts budget.
Is that Muslin?
Should be a simple question, but when you work with intermediaries and the transaction goes one pile of paper to another, basically, is there a cost to that, or is that absorbed within your budget?
The cost of us doing the work to underwrite those loans, we simply work that into our existing staff capacity and our operations department.
That's the essential answer, and thank you.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it.
And those intermediaries, of course, as I think you're all familiar, guarantee us repayment 100%, even if the underlying project fails, which is the other way in which we protect the state's cash.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Appreciate it. I'll be hanging around for the conversation later.
Do folks need anything else on this? Anyone need any more testimony or time? Yes.
So I don't see where this is the job of the treasurer's office.
That seems like a good question for the treasurer's office, should they come back into the chair? Okay. I just don't want to be the one who answers it.
I wouldn't either.
Great to be back here. Mr. Trombley. Yeah. 10 VSA 10, some time ago established, and I can send you the link as well. Established within the treasurer's office, the authority to lend at that time up to 10% of the state's cash balances. And it said no further restrictions to lend them. Yes. And that's what, we do through the traditional LIAC loan program.
To the public?
We lend those funds, there are no further restrictions beyond that we follow prudent investor guidelines. We, within that program, have a local investment advisory committee. It's made up of individuals like Michael Gahn, the VHFA, VITA, VSAC, and Efficiency Vermont, as well as the bond bank. And together we craft an investment policy that guides how we make those investments, but there are no further statutory limitations on how we make those investments.
Where do I get the idea it's 10 million?
It was 10% originally. And, when the program was created, I think the state would have had, I'm going to hazard a guess, around 200 million in cash on hand in a typical year. So the program was much smaller before the pandemic and the subsequent increase in the state's cash balances. Right now, we're hovering around 1.5. To be conservative, we set our limit at the program to assume the state has 1.2 billion in cash. We do that for a couple of reasons. One, that's where we think we'll trend over the long term. Two, that's where we're at if we remove reserves and other restricted forms of cash. So the program has grown substantially as the state's cash balance has grown substantially. Originally, it was much smaller in scope.
Has anybody talked to the governor about this?
The governor's office is, aware of the program. There have been a number of conversations between ourselves and ACCD and DHCD about, partnering in terms of where we apply resources. This 1% subcredit facility for offsite construction is really a product of those conversations of the governor's administration. But
Product of his administration.
a product of our conversations with members of his administration, where they have been doing some great work to advance offsite construction, and we have the lending capacities to support that work.
In your email to me, can you tell me their names?
Sure. Absolutely.
I think Charlie had some offline conversations with DH.
Yeah, I did with the Department of Housing. And they are very much in support of this, especially the increase of the 12.5% with Commissioner Alex Farrell. So he's probably a very good person to talk to about it.
Well, I just want to remind everybody around the table, this is not free money we're talking about. This money belongs somehow to Vermont taxpayers. We need to be careful with what we're doing here.
Agreed.
So I'm really reluctant to support this.
Representative Kimball has been voicing some private concerns I'm now making public awkwardly without checking with him. And so I've also been thinking a lot about sort of the, protecting the risk to the state. And what I've learned is that this is actually, the interest that we're earning on this is bringing in new revenue, and the treasurer's office is very careful about that. But the questions that I asked about risk were about being really careful about, like, at what point would it be too much to lend out that it would be a risk to taxpayers' dollars? And it seems like we're pretty far from that point.
So it would be more than 12.5?
Yeah. Do you have like a point where you'd be like, you wild legislators, no way are we lending out that much?
I think if the legislature were to try to give us authority to go above 20%, we would likely not support that growth in our authority.
And so we're pretty far from that.
I think so. Between the climate facility, between this expansion of the credit facility, we're going up to 15. That means 85% of our cash is liquid at any given moment. And we feel that's more than enough for the state to meet its obligations.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that the questions have been asked about protecting the revenues of the state, and that your thought process analysis, I think, has been pretty succinct. I mean, pretty straightforward. And the fact that we're ending up with more revenues for the state, and also potentially more money, well, actually more money going out for housing, I think is admirable. So on balance and without much reservation, I'd say this is good.
Appreciate that. And you're quite right, Representative Brannigan, this is the taxpayers' money and it is needed for other purposes down the line. That's where our intermediary policy works well, where these intermediaries that we lend through are always guaranteeing us repayment. So the underlying financial institution would have to fail for the state to ever risk non-repayment.
At will. I mean, can we get it back when we say we want it back this afternoon?
We can't call in the loan that I'm aware of at will. But VHFA, for example, pledges their own balance sheet of assets in repayment. So if the project were to fail and the loan were to not be repaid to VHFA, VHFA would still be obliged to repay us using whatever assets they have at their disposal.
And do not have an updated fiscal note, so we're actually not going to vote on the bill now. So anyone who wants to do some homework has time to do that. Okay. Representative Holcomb, did you have a question?
I'll ask that question, but I'll get it.
Okay, you're welcome
Well,
to.
I'm just curious, because does the treasurer have to, some of the people you mentioned on your advisory board are also the people who are doing the lending, is that correct? Do you have people on your advisory board who aren't the people doing the lending?
Yes, we do. And I mean, as a general practice, I want to say that those on the advisory board, if they are party to one of the loans, they recuse themselves from those particular votes.
What's the balance of members on the advisory board?
So we have in this credit facility, 2 members of the advisory board their organizations have also served as an intermediary. Those would be VITA and VHFA. In the climate credit facility, the bond bank has served as the intermediary.
Sorry, 1 second.
Is Samantha still in the room?
No.
I think she's confused about the one she's using.
Samantha, if you're somehow in Ways and Means, can you stop sharing your screen? I think you're in a different committee.
I'll stop sharing.
Okay. Okay.
Happens, are you guys also on that?
We have 5 members of the LIAC committee with the treasurer then as chair, so 6 total. Those members are VSAC, VHFA, VITA, the Bond Bank, and Efficiency Vermont. In our housing loans, VITA and VHFA have served as intermediaries in the past. And in our municipal loans, the Bond Bank has served as the intermediary.
The Banking Association, what do they feel about this? You're it appears that you're in competition with our banks, and that may be trying to do the same work.
I appreciate that. I spoke to Chris Delia this morning. He's in support of this change. I mean, there are 2 ways in which this program has been really beneficial for banks and credit unions. One is when those entities are serving as the direct intermediary. So the treasurer will be announcing the details tomorrow of a loan we're providing to the Bank of Bennington, where they will then be able to turn around and lend out that money to housing projects in their community. And they get to earn a markup on those loans for the cost of underwriting those loans out to individuals and for the that they're taking on and guaranteeing us repayment. So that's directly creating business for example, the Bank of Bennington in that scenario. The other way in which we indirectly create a lot of business for banks and credit unions is typically projects are only coming to us when they have maxed out the level of commercial debt that they can afford to take on at 6, 7, 8%, whatever that entity is charging. And they need more debt in order to move forward with the project. They can't afford to take any more from the bank. So they're able to take it from us. And when they move forward with the project, they're able to actually execute on those loan agreements they had made with the banks. So that's business that the banks would not ever be able to execute and earn a profit on if it were not for our intervention allowing those projects to go forward. So in both those ways, our local banks and credit unions have been really excellent partners in this project. And I think that it's been very mutually beneficial for those entities.
Could you or would you be directing these monies, this loan or loans to specific areas in Vermont, or that's probably
We do our best to maintain a geographic balance throughout the state. The biggest limit to us in doing so is where do we see applications coming from? To date, we've invested in 12 out of 14 counties in the state. The 2 counties we've not been able to make an investment in are Lamoille and Essex. And I am certain with Essex, and I'm reasonably certain with Lamoille, we simply have not received an application from either of those 2 counties. So if anyone is listening from either of those 2 counties, very much like to receive an application.
I had another question, but I'll defer.
We're actually gonna represent Maslin next, so.
Thank you. The more we learn, the more sophisticated this arrangement seems to be, and I appreciate it. How often, in what manner is all this reported to the legislature, the appropriate committees and that sort of stuff?
Appreciate that. We report annually on the activities of the LIAC program, including our loan structure and agreements. So I'm happy to send you our most recent loan.
And we may get it anyway. I just haven't read it, but thank you. Appreciate it.
Looking at it right now, it's November 15th, 2025. I'll circulate it to the committee and ask Sorcia to post it.
Much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie.
Representative
Yeah,
Page and then Odie?
I'm curious on the loans. Are you looking to assist a particular group of individuals? Is this low income, middle income, or all monetary groups?
Our investment policy allows us to invest in housing from affordable to market rate. It has no particular restrictions there. I'd say we have a preference for affordable housing. The vast majority of our portfolio has been entirely or in part affordable housing. We do see a lot of mixed developments where there's everything from market rate to affordable apartments all in one building or in one neighborhood. So our investments span the gambit from types of housing, although they are skewed towards more affordable housing. We also have had a growing, I'd say, interest in senior housing, which we think is a growing need in the state. One investment we're very proud of is the Virgins Grand assisted living facility, which recently opened up in downtown Virgins. Those are, I think, great investments. For us, it's more affordable to create 40 units of senior housing that open up 40 4-bedroom homes than to create 40 4-bedroom homes. They also create permanent jobs through caretakers in those communities as well. So
I love it. Keep on going.
There seems to be a lot of money, state money out there for housing. Are we flooding the market with maybe too much money out there?
it's a good question. Our most recent round of funding, we thought we would be able to do 20 million. We ended up being able to do, I think, a little over 30 because we restructured some existing loans. I want to say we received north of 80 million in applications for that 20 million initial funding request. So from our perspective, we're continuing to see substantial need, and we're not able to fund every project that comes to us with an application.
Representative Odie, do you still have a question?
So if you look at geographic distribution, is there any other criteria you use?
Yeah, we look at the economic development impact that we see within the communities. We look at access to transportation and those developments. I'm wondering, do you know of other criteria off the top of your head in our investment policy?
We can say it around.
Yeah,
Circulated the investment policy too, so you now have the investment policy in your report.
thank you. That's much appreciated, Representative. There are a number of criteria we look at. We also look at, the cost per unit and also the cost per unit in terms of what they're requesting from us to try to make our dollars go as far as possible. And we try to maintain spectrum in our portfolio of market rate to affordable housing.
Representative Local?
Seeing overall trends in cost per unit?
You're going up.
Yes, that speaks to your question, because I know it's
Particularly for affordable housing. We've only been operating the program for a couple of years, but it's not unsurprising these days to see certain particular affordable housing developments be over $500,000 per unit sometimes in their cost.
Are you done?
Yeah, no, I'll share with you some of that, because I think the manufactured housing revolving fund is an effort to address some of the labor shortages that are driving that higher unit price.
Representative Brannigan.
Madam Chair, I'd like to request that we have,
We're waiting on a fiscal note regardless, so we won't be voting on this until tomorrow, at the earliest.
the banker,
Chris Delia.
Chris Delia.
Mhm.
Can we have him in here to testify? Because I also spoke with him this morning and he wasn't that enthused. He said it was a competition against them that they didn't need, and I think we need to have him in here on record.
Okay, thanks.
We have different stories, and that makes me even more
Okay, thank you.
skeptical.
We can talk to Alex Farrell either offline or in testimony as well.
Alex Farrell would be excellent to have in here non-record.
Okay, thank you.
And I don't honestly know what he will say. But I can say myself that I absolutely agree and understand how desperate we are for housing in this state and in Franklin County where I represent. But the thing I don't like is that it's the treasurer's office. I don't see that as the job of the treasurer's office. This is taxpayer money. And that's not the purpose of the office. I don't see anywhere in the description that that's, investment, that that's not investment in housing, it's investment. And I just,
I guess I hear your concerns. From my perspective, if the money has to be invested, which it should be, right? We want to invest the money that's sitting there for the taxpayers.
Yeah.
I would rather I want it to be invested so that we get a good return. I also want it to be invested in places that are going to benefit Vermonters, right? And so that seems like, that's why, to me, it's part of the job of the treasurer. Do we have any more questions for the treasurer's office?
I just have one.
Yeah, is it for the treasurer? Yeah, go for it.
Right now we're in a war. And if things go south, and, we're in the war for a longer period of time. Do you have any thoughts about, what that might have on the market or, building houses or economic development within Vermont in, let's just say next year?
It's a big question, that I'm not sure I have, an answer to you.
I don't.
My head. I'll say, risk is risk. And so when we are constructing these loans, the existence of the intermediaries is the ultimate backstop for the state against that risk. Where if there is a downturn in the housing market and it leads to the defaulting on a number of housing loans out in the community, that won't come back to us because of these intermediaries that are absorbing that risk and guaranteeing us repayment. So we do our best to insulate ourselves against trends in the housing market.
I'll just make one other comment. Your office has done some good work with, with pharmaceuticals, reducing costs for healthcare. And I'm just wondering whether there are other areas that might be more suitable than spending it on housing right now.
It's a good question. I think when the treasurer came into office in 2023, it was clear to him in that moment that housing was our greatest challenge we're facing as a state. I think, in my opinion, healthcare is rising to be an equal challenge for this state. I'd have to put more thought into where loans could be helpful in that industry and in bringing down costs for Vermonters there. We would have to think more about that, but the investment policy is open and flexible. It can be amended by the LIAC committee. The LIAC committee has membership that extends beyond housing experts. And so the flexibility that's baked into the program is such that over time, future years with future challenges and needs for the state, it can change in terms of its investment portfolio.
Representative Muslim.
Yeah, two brief comments. One is I appreciate the perspective of Representative Brannigan with regards to this stuff, because it's not. I wasn't thinking about these particular things until you brought them up. I think now that we're all aware of what the concerns might be, looking into LIAC work, this kind of stuff is very much what we should be doing. And I would acknowledge that the treasurer's office is doing a whole lot of stuff that wasn't, or at least from my perspective, that wasn't typical a while back. But I could also say, and this is where I may get a little Pollyanny, a little silly. When I was much younger, banker's hours were described as like 9 AM to 3 PM or something, and then they, I don't know what they did, count the small change or something like that, but the doors were closed in the town I grew up in another bank. So I'm acknowledging that, banks and treasurer's offices are doing a whole lot of things that just were not talked about or probably not done at all, a number of decades ago. And I think we need to acknowledge that, we need to go there. So that's enough. You get the point. Thank you.
Appreciate that.
I want to encourage the committee to read the investment policy and the annual report before we meet again, because it really does spell out how the treasurer's office came out with a pretty comprehensive policy about where to invest, how long the loans are for, the amortization, everything else. It's very informative, and for geeks like us, it's exciting reading.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Of course.
So folks, we're gonna, we'll find time in the agenda later this week to look at the fiscal note update, and schedule a vote, and hear from any more witnesses that we need to hear from. I don't know when that will be because the agenda is something of a ever-changing puzzle these days. I would love if we could take a moment to vote on 757. That was the mobile home one that we started the day with, or didn't start the day. We did at some point. We talked about it at some point. Was that yesterday?
Today.
Today, that was today. Great.
Did start, feels like yesterday.
Madam Chair, would you place a vote proposed motion on that?
I don't even remember what the bill number is. 757.
Actively manufactured homes and limited equity cooperatives.
Thank you. Oh, I'm missing my 9 o'clock slot on the agenda. That's what's on. Okay.
So who was-
Like such an updated version. I'm gonna vote on it. Okay.
Amend.
So,
Who we find it favorable as we've worked on it,
so you're moving that we amend it?
as we've discussed in committee.
Would folks rather have a break and we come back in 10 minutes and do it then? Great, let's do that.
Reading my eyes.